and this is an annual event, and I guess I'm mainly speaking to the studio audience. And this will be recorded, it'll be available on television and in our archives, and we have one of these each year, and I'm really happy to see it here, and now you can start.
We'll welcome Judge Roberto Alcazar, who has words from freeholder Estrada. The mayor was here earlier and was not able to continue to join us as he was going on that breast cancer walk, so he does send his regards.
Angel Estrada, who is one of our freeholders, and he's referring to the Historical Society of Elizabeth. He says, on behalf of the Union County Board of Freeholders, congratulations on the successful planning of this year's annual discussion on diaspora within our Latin American community. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend this afternoon program, as my presence is required, at a concurrent Young Adults Conference where I am being honored, so he has to be there. So he'd like to thank me for doing this on his behalf. And he indicates that the complex topic of diaspora is tangible and difficult within our community in both rhetoric and policy, and today's political climate often only adds to the hardship of refugee populations and the lives of those forced from their home for circumstances beyond their control. And as a Cuban American, these sentiments resonate with me, he says, on a personal level. This event is just a small piece of the very exciting county-wide historical festival called, unquote, 4 centuries in a weekend, close quote. And for today and tomorrow, all county historical sites will be open to the public, many featuring engaging programs similar to today's. And he says that he strongly encourages all present to find more information on these events on ucnj.org. Sincerely, Angel Estrada, Union County Freeholder.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us this morning. Our conversation today is Nuestra Juventud, Nuestro Futuro, our youth, our community, and it is a continued conversation about the Hispanic diaspora. Approximately 20% of the total population of people who call the state of New Jersey home are of Hispanic descent. This equates to approximately 1.8 million Latinos in the state of New Jersey. Union County has a total population of about 600,000 people, and 31% of them identify themselves as Hispanic. This means that nearly 200,000 Latinos live within Union County specifically. In the city of Elizabeth, New Jersey's 4th largest city with a population of about 128,000 people, about 63% of residents are of Hispanic descent. This means that 80,000 people living in Elizabeth are part of this, which we will discuss today, the Hispanic diaspora. My name is Mirta Tejada, and I'm honored to be here with you today to help facilitate this very important dialogue. I'm a first-generation American born to immigrants from the Dominican Republic. I grew up in Jersey City and have been residing in Union County since 2012, my husband and 3 children. I'm an alumnus of Rutgers University and New York University and have been an administrator in higher education for over 20 years. I'm pleased today to be joined by a very distinguished panel. To my immediate left is Christian Estevez. Christian currently serves as the president of Latino Action Network and executive vice president of the Communication Workers of America, Local 1037. He has a long history of community activism at the state and local levels that stem as far back as his days as a student at Rutgers University. He continued his service to the community, helping organize several local and statewide Latino organizations, serving on boards of other organizations, including the New Jersey Immigrant Policy Network, New Jersey Citizen Action, and New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. Through his community activism, Christian's played a critical role in the passage of important legislation, including the in-state tuition and financial aid for Dreamers. He is currently working on legislation that would provide driver's license to undocumented immigrants. Christian has also taught at Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations for several years as an adjunct instructor. Welcome, Christian. Ms. Sara Peña far left from me lives in Newark, New Jersey, along with her family, where she was born, raised, and educated. Her mother was born in Ecuador and her father in Dominican Republic. Ms. Peña is the director of the Center for Hispanic Policy, Research, and Development at the New Jersey State Department. Ms. Peña is a dedicated bilingual professional with extensive experience in developing and promoting services while addressing the needs of the community with a superior record of successful community service and engagement. She received her bachelor's degree in management from King University and her master's degree in public administration from Rutgers University in Newark. Inspired by her son, Anthony, Ms. Peña founded the Boys to Leaders Foundation. Its mission is to empower and motivate young men by providing leadership, training, educational programs, and positive personal and professional development. Ms. Peña is also the president of the Fund, Incorporated, an organization dedicated to the empowerment of all Latinos in New Jersey. Welcome, Sada. Thank you very much. As you can see from their bios, very busy individuals, and we are truly honored to have them here today to join us in this conversation. Today, our panelists will offer their personal and professional experience with and insight about the important sector of our community, Nuestra Juventud. We will be discussing the Hispanic youth, the climate in which they are growing up in, the issues that they will be confronted with in the future, and how we as a community can rally around them to prepare them for that future. After this discussion, we will open the floor for questions and comments from the audience, and we certainly hope that you will participate in this dialogue. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk. Just want to begin with a few statistics that I think are important to frame our conversation this morning. The youth is a defining characteristic of the U.S. Latino population. About 6 in 10 Latinos in the U.S. are 35 or younger. The number of young Latinos, which is about 35 million, increased to 20% from a decade earlier, making it one of the largest and fastest growing youth populations in the country. Latinos are the nation's youngest major racial or ethnic group. The under 18 Hispanic population in the United States is 18.3 million. Right here in New Jersey, Latinos accounted for more than 20% of K through 12 students in 2016. In that same year, those born in the U.S. accounted for 81% of Latinos under the age of 35, compared to 42% of them being 36 or older. The median age of 20 for many U.S.-born Latinos has not even entered adulthood. Latinos make up the fifth of the U.S. eligible voters, ages 18 to 35. And with midterm elections just a few weeks away, more than 29 million Latinos are eligible to vote nationwide. The Census Bureau projects that by 2060, the Hispanic community will comprise over 28% of the total population, with 119 million residing in the United States alone. These statistics are staggering. To believe that most of us identify as a minority, it's certainly not a reality necessarily in numbers like it used to be. So I'd like for that to frame our conversation when we think about the youth and really the significance that the youth can play in how this country moves forward and how we shape the experience of other Latinos and other immigrants in this country. So I'm going to start with a very broad question for our panelists. Why is pausing to consider and discuss the youth, the future of our community, important?
I think it's important. The youth have a lot to say. They're our future. It's extremely important that we listen to what they're saying, that we're engaged with them and not always putting them aside like, oh, they don't know. They do know. We need to recognize that they are extremely smart, motivated, but we need to tap into those resources. So this is the time that we need to be more, really listening to what's going on and what's important to them. What's important to them today is different than it was 25 years ago when I was younger. So listening, I think it's really important because you are our future, and we want to be that pipeline to create the next generation of leaders, especially in New Jersey and Union County.
I think that the statistics you just cited, that illustrate this, right? You have this huge group of young people who are coming of age, turning 18. One of the things that we saw in the last census was that when they broke it down, the Latino community by age groups, you saw that, every year that there was gonna be X amount of millions of Latinos turning 18, right? And so while in the past, it used to be that if you wanted to get the Latino community engaged in politics and policy discourse, that you went and you tried to get the older folks naturalized citizens and then get them registered to vote. And that was always proved to be a very, hard, grueling process, right? And with very small incremental progress, right? But what we're seeing now with the demographics is that you have like these huge portions of the population turning 18 every year, and they are the people who are going to inherit the policy decisions we make now, right? So, listening to the young people, but also understanding that in this age of technology, when they have everything in their hands, and if they're being bombarded by, quite truthfully, information that doesn't matter much, right? That we need to be doing a better job of getting important information in their hands so they can make serious decisions about their own futures, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about their future, and so it's important to engage them, both to talk about what's important to them, but also to impart upon them, right, the institutional memory of our community, right? Because, they don't need to be reinventing the wheel. Things have happened already that inform our development as a community that impact them, and they need to know what those things are. So we got to figure out ways to get that information to them.
I'd like to put in context a comment that Rita said, and perhaps even tie it in with some of your comments. I think it was a good observation that you said that in terms of numbers, we really may not be a minority in the state of New Jersey. And that's good to know that the numbers are good, but we remain a minority in the different stratas of integration and participation, whether it be government as elected officials, will be government as employees, in the three branches of government, will be the judiciary, will be the executive branch, and corporate America. For example, I keep reading that little by little, and a trickle, many more young professionals are joining now the ranks of partners in the bigger law firms in the state. So you can have all the numbers you like, but if you're not integrated and participating in the different levels of society, you remain a minority. And so far, maybe even a silent minority. So if we don't participate from the electoral process, if we don't register, if we don't vote, we would be hearing the words of Senator Chris Chapman of the 33rd District. Bob Menendez succeeded him into that position. And he used to say, and I have the benefit of advanced age to tell you all of this, I love the Spanish people. They come for the census, but they don't vote. Now, that is really an indictment of a community, because all the benefit of politics is in their hands, and we get nothing of it, because we don't vote. So, number one, we gotta participate in the electoral process, we gotta get our name in there, we gotta get out to vote. That's a discipline. And then we may be able to change that part of the larger group into a group that is not just in one side of society, but is now infiltrated, I should say, in a very nice and positive definition. We've infiltrated now the different strands of government where we now participate. And I'll let the panel do.
So certainly, I think that's an important point, Roberto, and thank you. What I hear is we have to engage, we have to listen. So in what ways do we engage? What form, either directly or indirectly, do we create formal ways of engaging the youth and listening? How is that possible? How can we use technology to aid us in that process? Those are questions that we have to entertain. And really the responsibility is on us, right? as the older generation, that's scary to think, right? But as the older generation, how do we develop those venues for students to be heard and to be engaged and to get the political savviness to understand the social reality that they're living and how politics and economy are all linked to that. So just some suggestions of things that you think may help in that. And certainly with social institutions like the church and the family and schools that lend themselves to that type of engagement or dialogue. But I wonder if you have innovative ways that you may want to suggest.
I would say that that's one of the things that we tried to tackle when we created the Latino Action Network in 2009, which was, we understanding the demographics, understanding what our challenge was in talking to this younger generation. We started the organization and we had a mix of older and younger people, and as we started to roll out what we were going to do, we had some of the older folks say, you can't do that, that's not how we do it. No, that's not how we do it. And we kept having to push back on that and saying, well, that what might have worked, or maybe didn't work really, but that might have been the way you did it, but we need to communicate with this young generation and they are doing things differently now. So, having these physical meetings in one room where you have 10 old men sitting together trying to decide for everybody, and no offense to everybody, myself and older, right? But that was not necessarily what's going to do it, right? We needed to be on social media. We needed to be going and speaking to them at their colleges and at their high schools. We needed to be talking to middle school kids, right? And we also needed to be working with grassroots organizations that have the hand-on, directly with these kids, right, from a young age, because we didn't want to wait until they turned 18 to then engage them. This is a process that starts from very young. My children, I have 3 children as well, and it's the family is the first teacher, right? So teaching them, that moral grounding, right? And I don't just mean religious moral grounding, but also the grounding of, yes, we want you to do well in school, we want you to get an education, we want you to get a career, but we also want you to be aware of your background, your community, the struggles of your own community, so that when you make it, right, when you actually become financially successful, you don't turn your back on your community. You understand that you have a responsibility, right? And so that's what we try to do as an organization. That's what we try to model. We encourage our member organizations to do the same at the grassroots level and hope to replicate that all around.
So within the Voice to Leaders Foundation, what we started about in 2013, and it's primarily, we listen to our youth board, right? Our youth board runs everything. They are very much engaged in who handles social media for us, who does our postings, what are some of the issues that are affecting them, their day-to-day life, what's going on at home. So we're constantly having that face-to-face communication, or whether it's FaceTime with them and so forth. So the board is created of educators or people that are, CEOs of United Way or institutions like Rutgers University, and we all have this connection with our youth. Our conference that we have every year, our youth provide feedback. Oh, I didn't like the food. Something as simple as that is really important to them, right? So we have to pay attention. Next year, we can't give them pizza. We have to give them something a little higher. So we do a lot of that engaging at Voice to Leaders, engaging them, listening to them. They tell us what kind of workshops they want. They tell us who they want to meet. And we bring leaders that look like us, our brown leaders, to show them, hey, look, some kids never even step foot on college campus. So they said, we want to have the conference on a college campus. I've never been there. Fine. The literature that we have comes in Spanish too, because some of our students struggle with, Spanish not being their first language, so English not being their first language. So there's a lot of that goes on to Voice to Leaders, so that we're developing them, we're helping them navigate through some of the barriers that they're going, and not all of them have barriers. Some of them, 2-family homes, great parents, went to college, but they still want to be around others. And I think that's also important to expose them to what others just like them are going through, some of the struggles. I also, through Lupe, the Latino organization, we offer scholarships to young Latinas throughout the state of New Jersey. And to date, we awarded maybe $100,000, where we have these young ladies, after they graduate, serve as board members to the only Latina statewide organization in New Jersey. So they're coming back and speaking about the issues that they've encountered, how they've overcome it, sharing their stories, and now we're developing them as leaders to continue the organization or whatever profession they want to continue on.
I have a question. When you say graduate from high school or college?
For Voice to Leaders, high school. We go middle school and high school students. Yeah.
What would you say is the most significant issue currently facing the Latino community that will have the largest impact on the youth?
Educational inequality, I think, is extremely one of the biggest barriers. We've seen that in the recent New York Times article that talked about how that is now one of the most important issues affecting our youth today, and that they're expressing the need to have just a clean classroom, you know, just the environment itself, and the education and the teachers that are teaching in some of these schools are not the same that are teaching in other areas. How do we bridge that gap? How do we have these conversations? I think that the education is now gotten higher than the immigration issue, you know, increased in some of the youth's concerns when we talk about immigration and some of the other barriers that are holding back our students. But I think that that's why communities need to get together, families need to get together. It starts, you have to build that strong foundation at home, right? But if you don't have that, you look towards others, social workers, school, guidance counselors. What are they doing? Let's start holding them accountable to teaching our kids and having that engagement, because they're the first ones that our kids see. So I think that that seems to be a problem, one of the biggest barriers for us. And now we're getting everyone to college, but we're not, the retention rate is also very low. Where are the resources for that? So through Voice to Leaders, we are trying to address some of those gaps and disparities, how to deal with that and overcome it.
I concur 100% with education, and it's from, you know, pre-K to early childhood education all the way through. You know, at the Latino Action Network, we look at it systemically, right? And we looked at, you know, the issue of what are the barriers that Latino students are facing in their schools. And when you map it out in the state of New Jersey, we found that one of the things that was starkly, you know, sticking out to us was that the majority of Latino students are segregated into schools, right, that are hyper segregated and high poverty, right? So you have concentrations of poverty where this teachers and the guidance counselors and everybody is doing great work. They're working hard. They're probably the best teachers, you know, in the state, but they're teaching in classrooms where they have 30 students that are all drowning. 30 students who all have families that have major crisis going on. And the teachers end up dealing with maybe some behavioral issues that stem from that, and spend more time trying to deal with those issues than actually imparting education on these kids. So it's not that the teachers are not good teachers or they're not trying hard, it's that they're facing this really difficult challenge. And then when you go outside of these areas of concentrated poverty, you go to the suburbs around it, and there's none of that, right? These families, they're thriving, their kids are coming to school fed, well rested, well exercised, and they're coming to learn, and then you have a different outcome, and there's no proof that those teachers are any better, right?
Absolutely.
There's no proof that those teachers work any harder, or more prepared, or anything, or that they even give a different curriculum, that they're trying to teach the same material. So what we found is that one of the biggest contributing factors to the achievement gap is this hyper-segregation and concentrated poverty. And so Latino Action Network, and we partner with NAACP and other organizations, we're the lead plaintiff on a lawsuit in New Jersey that's seeking to overturn the segregation in New Jersey. Because when you look at, I'm glad we're in the historical society, right? Because when you look at the history of New Jersey, right, what you had was, after this, around the 60s, white flight out of the urban areas, right? And then a system of residential redlining, right? So that if a black or Latino family wanted to follow the folks into the suburbs, they were told, no, you can't rent here, you can't buy here, right? So you gotta stay where you're at. And so it's not that if we keep Black and Latinos together, that somehow makes it worse. It's the concentration of poverty and crisis that does it, right? And so my own experience, right, having been a first generation son of Dominican immigrants, being raised by a single mother in Plainfield, being one of those kids in crisis, that I was going down that path of struggling in school, where I was in a classroom where I was surrounded by 29 other students who were all in my same situation. My mother got together with my older brothers once they graduated school and were able to help chip in for, for rent, and they rented a small apartment in Westfield, which you're all probably familiar with, right? And Westfield's a higher end community, mostly white, less challenges. And when I got there, it was a big difference, because now the teachers could say, okay, 29 students, they're all doing well, Christian's struggling. Let's get him the help he needs. Go to the guidance counselor has plenty of time to help me out, because she's not dealing with 100 kids who are all drowning. And on and on. So I was able to get services, and it didn't cost that district much anymore, right? And so they were able to help me out. And when I got the help, and it helped me get to Rutgers, where I met Mirta, right?
We met before that.
We met before that. We've known each other because our brothers went to school together, right? But when that happened, there were some people who wanted to tell me, well, you're the exception, you're special, you're this. It's like, no, that didn't fly for me, because I understood that, like, there were plenty of kids that were back in Plainfield that didn't get the opportunity I got, who were just as special, just as, had just as much, internal talent, right, that wasn't tapped, right? And I wish they had the same opportunities. So I've been working on this since a very young age, trying to understand this, culminating in this lawsuit now, trying to say, listen, why is this like this, right? The state of New Jersey, segregation is illegal under the Constitution, educational segregation, right? And the state, this has already been decided, but that conflicts with a rule that says that you have to go to school within the municipal boundary under where you live, right? And that's what we're challenging now. Not to say that people shouldn't go to the Elizabeth schools, they should. They should have the choice to stay here, but also people should be able to go to the neighboring town, and the neighboring town should be able to come here, right? And if you were able to mix it up a little bit, then you wouldn't have that classroom with 30 kids who are all drowning and in crisis, right? You'd have much more diversity in terms of socioeconomics, and when that happens, studies have shown, academic studies have shown, that the academic performance for everybody, for the Latino kid, for the Black kid, for the white kid, for the poor kid, and for the rich kid, it all improves, right? So, it is education, but we have to go further than just telling kids stay in school. We have to do something about it, right? And so that's what, and this is not the only thing that to do about it, there's other things, but this is what we're focusing on right now.
And I, in terms of higher education, having now worked over 20 years in higher education, we understand and we know that college success is not about aptitude. Being able to graduate from college has more to do with cultural capital and your ability to network with faculty members and really understand the role that a faculty member plays in your success. And so, I work at a community college. It's a Hispanic serving institution, yet our faculty and our administration do not reflect in any way our student body. Most of our faculty and administrators do not come from backgrounds, even from a social or economic, from a class standpoint. They don't reflect those experiences. So when you sit around the table and you look at our retention numbers and you look at our attrition and say, where are these students going? And mind you, community colleges need the enrollment because we survive off the students that come and pay tuition. We don't get enough money from the state or the federal government to survive, so the tuition is key. We have to be able to have discussion what is it that those students don't have, and oftentimes it's cultural capital. It's being exposed to people unlike them that can help them either strategically plan for their future, provide awareness of what else is out there from the communities. Oftentimes you'll have inner city kids that have never left that community. We have students in Perth Amboy and New Brunswick. then we have a site, because those students never wanna come to Edison. They don't wanna leave City Line because they feel like, I'm not welcome there, I'm not comfortable there. And for us, and for me as an administrator in higher ed, is really looking at creating that level of comfort for students and to self-identify, to be able to say, I don't know. You know, and not exclude yourself to just certain populations in the community college, to build networks that are beyond the Latino or the African American that you're comfortable with, being able to expand your network to really be successful, understanding that, you know, that is important. But by much more of a stretch of imagination is to pushing back on administrators and at the college president, at the county freeholders, to say, we need to look. We as an institution, the Hispanic serving institution of Middlesex County College, needs to look like the community we serve. And until we achieve that, we're doing a disservice to students. And I think that has to transgender across educational lines. So from pre-K all the way up to even graduate school. We're not having, you know, the lawyers and doctors and you know, PhD candidates, medical doctors or PhD candidates. That number is, for the number of students that are actually in college, that number is even, it's in the single digits. They can't, even if they get accepted into the program, they can't survive. And it's large in part with cultural capital and providing exposure to students outside of their communities and outside of their reality to understand that they can be part of a world that seems so far away from them. So in what ways could we help cultivate a culture within these small communities that prepares students for the future in this country?
I think it really is, you know, as you said, it's creating those networks, it's creating that interaction. You know, at a young age, Plainfield was my world, right? And only Latino families and African American families, that's what I knew. When I got to Westfield and I started to learn, you know, to see what other young people were doing, what experiences they were, you know, what adventures they were going on. They were going off to visit other states, other countries, and all these type of things. And their limit of what they could do it didn't exist. It was like the stars are the limit, right? Whereas for me, it was like, you know, my thought of my life was survive, right? Was, you know, do I make it to 21 without being in jail or dead, right? And I gotta tell you something, even when I did make it 21 and I had been exposed to more, I was like, I don't have any plans beyond this, because I never really thought that, I really never gave it thought that I'd make it beyond this. And I had to start thinking, oh wow, what do I do? So I think that creating those opportunities for networking, you know, outside, but also continuing to build, you know, tight connections within our own community so that we support each other, right? So that when, like I said, when you make it, you know, you're reaching back, right? That when there's opportunities like today, we can talk to the young people, you know, that people know that it's important to make the time to do this, because it's not okay for just me to do it. I have to be reaching back all the time.
Christine, what role did your parents play on that great story that I can channel in with you on that of survival? What role?
My mother worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs.
Okay.
You know, she was, you know, she when my parents broke up when I was 9, right? And my father went back to Dominican Republic, and my mother was on her own. She went back and got her high school diploma, got her beautician's license, but working as a beautician wasn't gonna make enough money or have health care insurance for us. So she worked another job at a doctor's office for the health insurance. So she couldn't be there, she couldn't come to back to school nights, she couldn't go to parent-teacher conferences, she couldn't support me that way, but she made sure there was a roof over my head, that, you know, that I ate every day, right, and provided me shelter, right? And I know that she wishes she could have done more, but I think she did a superhero's job.
How
But
many children?
how many children?
Siblings?
They're 1 of 4,
So she was doing that for 4 children?
yes.
What did that cost to you to see your mother struggling like she did?
What
How did it impact you?
it showed me that women are superheroes.
Okay,
That's what it showed me.
and
It
that's
showed me
true.
that she's a superhero.
That's true,
And
now what
that,
else?
and that she worked hard 24 hours a day, and that anytime that I said I couldn't do something, all I do was look at her and see that she never gave up. I can never give up.
It would, you'll be ashamed if you fell short of
Yeah,
that goal.
that's right.
What a great role model you have. What a wonderful role model you have. And that is why I think it's critical, that everything that is planned and we talked about here is great. But one more component really needs to be added in some way here is we need to do a little reaching out to the family to find out what structure exists, because without a structure, this youngster is not going anyplace except to delinquency. I have seen enough. I did that course for 6 years. So I understand. When there's structure, there's success. When there's no structure, we have failure.
But I'll add to that, right, just to answer, I'm sorry, I
No,
don't need
that's
to
okay.
dominate this, but I'll add to that, right, is that right now we're in a situation where we have government structures that are taking funds and taking resources away from the help that these parents need, right? So when you're getting rid of after-school programs, when you're saying that early childhood education is glorified babysitting, right, that's the kind of attacks that we have to be working together collectively to push back on, because if we're, it's, when you go into the suburbs, right, and I live in Scotch Plains now, right, and I see professional women, right, who are married, who because of their wealth, and some of it is because they were able to pay for their first home with a trust fund from daddy, right, and they can say, okay, for the first 10 years of my kids' lives, I'm gonna stop working, right, and I'm gonna be the stay-at-home mom, I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna be the class mom and everything, and what that does for them. And then you go into the urban area, and you go into these places, and mom has to work like my mother did, right? And can't be in there, right? And then people wanna say, well, that's somehow the genetic inferiority of Latinos or African Americans, and their breakdown of their family structure. No, it's that we have structural barriers, and that we owe it as a society to build the support systems so that these same families can make it, so that our kids are not falling behind. By the time they're in 4th grade, they're not so far behind. And the way you do that, and it's proven, you have the data in your center, right? That when we started 20 years ago providing early childhood education, right, it started to close the gap, right? Now, when you look at the scores for Latino students and black students in Elizabeth, right, in 4th grade on the 4th grade test, in 3rd grade, it's different than it was 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, they weren't getting early childhood education. So I agree, there has to be family structure, but there also has to be societal structure, and we need to help.
I understand, and I understand what you're saying. However, I would say to you, that knowing the circumstances as we may see them in the horizon, and you say, well, there is a reduction of benefit, there's a reduction of programs, I would say to you, I would be looking more of the alternative route of, the self-protective route. I'm gonna have to do something for myself, knowing that I may not get the government help that I'm looking for. Because you can sit on a wafer and the roof will fall on your head. So it is not inappropriate for us to begin to think, to get up on your own and do what you can with the limited resources that exist. Because we may not have a great training ongoing. So I would say to you, self-sufficient and self-reliance is critical, and we need to teach that to our community. It's critical. Don't depend on anybody but you. You are the person that's going to make the difference, and something is going to stick.
I hate to be argumentative
Yeah,
with
me
you.
too.
And I don't want to be argumentative with you, but I would say that, you know what, you can build it, right? But they don't necessarily come, right? So I'm gonna give you an example. My boys, all 3 of my boys are in Scouts, in Boy Scouts, okay? I take them to the meetings, I take them to all the trips, right? But they have to work hard at it, right? My oldest is about to turn 16, he's about to become an Eagle Scout within about a year, right? I could take him to all the things. That institution of Scouts has been built by other adults, right? I wouldn't call it a gravy train. This is something that people all collectively come together to put together a program for them. But every single individual boy has to do their own work. And if you don't do the work, you don't become Eagle. That's why Eagle Scout is on 4% of all Scouts make Eagle, right? So, I'm using that as an example, right? we can create early childhood education, but if the child doesn't take advantage of all the things that we're giving to them, right, then they're not gonna succeed. So there's a component of you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but that has to be coupled with society saying, we're going to do our part to create the mechanisms to allow you to succeed. So I don't see it as one or the other, I see it as both.
You're younger than me.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
when I was coming up the system, I didn't have any of those support systems.
But that doesn't mean that it can't be, and
No,
it should.
I understand that.
It means
but-
that that's what
but you
we
were-
have to learn from those
I
experiences.
get that, Mita, but you were telling me that the government is drying up those resources. So now we are looking at a situation that is not as favorable. So the alternative will be go to the self-supporting and the self,
Or that we,
initiated,
or that we.
while you can continue your pushback. But if it doesn't come, you gotta get it
I
done.
have to, I agree, everything is valid, and they're great points, but that's why I started Voice to Leaders Foundation, because I have these resources, so how, nobody's making a change in my community in Newark. I'm a single mother raising this kid, having 3 jobs, and I have nobody to take care of him, or he's not being exposed to leaders that look like him. How can I help my community? I can't wait around for what's gonna happen 20 years down the road. The great work that's being done, like organizations like Lang and some of our elected officials. I have to do something right now for my kid.
There you
So
go.
I created this organization because I said, this is how I'm gonna empower these kids, I'm gonna motivate these kids, I'm gonna inspire them to go out and do something and dream bigger than I ever dreamed.
Right,
So-
absolutely.
But that's
That's in the
collective
meantime.
action, that's collective action.
That's not family.
Right, that's,
You did it for your son, but you're.
everybody in there is,
Others.
right,
Right.
families come in, so that's a part
Mhm.
of, everything
Yes.
goes together.
Well, and I think that, the family structure is important, I'll get to you even in a minute. Family structure is important. I think that we need to understand that family structure varies from community to community. So there is no one single definition of what family is. And the dynamics of the economic realities of family will change that structure. So, my father had a 3rd grade education, my mother had an 8th grade education. We grew up in Jersey City, my father had his own business, they were able to maintain their relationship, God knows how, because I wouldn't stay with my dad a day longer than my mother. But, she made it work. And they struggled financially, but they were able to achieve certain things because of who they linked themselves with in the community to help them understand what their resources are. My father was savvy enough to run his own business, savvy enough. You have to have the skills and the desire to be able to make things work and have a network or an environment that allows you to do that. If you have an environment that does not allow you, for single, I can't imagine a mom who's a single mom raising 3 or 4 kids, working 2 or 3 jobs, right? If you go to the school district and she's not going to parent-teacher, that child is forgotten about. 9 out of 10 times that child said their parents don't ever come, I can't get in touch with them, I'm moving on to the next kid because I need that family network. And that child is forgotten. And that is our problem in society, is that we forget those kids, that it's not because the family isn't there or the family isn't interested, but the family may not be able to do what they'd like to do. They may even realize that I really need to do, but I'm short $20 on that light bill and I need to keep the lights on, I'm gonna go work, I'm gonna go sell fruit on the corner, because that's all I can do.
It's a great point, and it goes also to the language barrier. I mean, my mother was home, but she wouldn't go to one open house because she didn't understand what they were saying. So then how does she get involved into my future and my life? Nobody told me anything about college.
But we're talking about extreme
You know.
circumstances here, we really are.
Yeah.
But we're all in extreme
We're
We're all,
circumstances.
this is our day-to-day life, for many of
We
them.
are the minority, the fact that
many
we're
of
college
them.
educated, that you're
Yeah,
is a minority in our
yeah.
community.
But your parents had values in their mind.
But so
And
did
those
other
were the
people.
values that continue to motivate you. No, listen, I've been through it, I know it, I've seen it.
So
We are a
right, so
community.
right.
When I came to Elizabeth in the mid-60s, I couldn't rent an apartment in many places. And I'm white, but when I opened my mouth, I was the end of it,
Yeah.
okay? And I went to school here, and I didn't have bilingual education, and I was a junior in high school. And I didn't know that that was the year where now my future was being built educationally. Because I had to sit for the SATs, I gotta write the applications, who was going to guide me? Who was going to tell me? Nobody, okay? A neighbor said, I think the high school you need to go to is the one that is right by the park. That's the best instruction I took. with a bilingual dictionary to fill out an application.
But you got help.
Great help.
That person
They told me
told you
what
where the high school
was.
was.
They
That
told
was
me what
help.
high school was.
You didn't do it on your own.
Of course not. But really, is this really the kind of help that's gonna make you a lawyer?
Yes.
Come on, I mean, you know,
Yes,
this
that
is,
was
listen,
fine.
there were a lot of steps from there.
They're really
Didn't have my legal education, right? And people weren't talking to me necessarily, no one in there was looking after my future. I had to really kind of put my boots on. This is the point that I just wanna make to you. Let's get the community to understand what is going to get us out of the hole more than waiting for government to do much for us, because it may not
But
come.
we're not waiting for government to get us out of the hole. The reality is that we have to fight for the resources because there's a fight. Let's be clear, there's a fight happening, okay? The fight is that there's some people who are saying that all that money the government has, we have to give it back to those 1% billionaires who they need it more,
I get that
right?
part.
And we have to say, no, we're gonna get out there and fight for it because we need to put it where it belongs. Because you know what? If there wasn't the resources for that teacher to drive my
I get it.
college application to William Patterson, because it was due the next day, because I didn't know that, because I didn't have that knowledge, right? I wouldn't be sitting here today. So every little bit of help, right? Anna Clash Rivera, the director of EOF at William Patterson, if she didn't help me connect with Hector Bonilla at Rutgers, I would have transferred there, I would have done the things I did, right? So every little thing helps, but
Absolutely.
we have to fight for it.
We want a piece of
right?
that pie. I
That's
get
right.
that point.
And
I really
and
do.
you were part of that fight, right? And you
Sure was.
and you being a judge, right? And help and I'm sure that when people came in front of you, you were a good judge who didn't just want to punish people, but also wanted to give people a chance to better their lives, right? And so sometimes you didn't just send somebody to jail. You said, I'm going to help. You're going to do this, or you're going to be in probation. You're going to do this program,
Showing the alternative.
right?
Showing
Show
the
alternative.
alternative.
But you were part of being the help. So nobody's sitting here waiting for the help. What we're doing is saying to young people, you need to work hard. You need to make the best of every opportunity you get. You need to be grateful for every individual who helped you,
Sure.
right? But
No,
you
I-
have to do the work.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that we're not. It seems to be arguing, but we're not. We're
No,
talking about two
we're
different
not
aspects of the same thing.
The point that I make.
It's exciting,
And
okay.
by the way,
The point that I
John right
make.
there had his hand up.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
I have a question, I have multiple questions.
Okay.
Earlier, Ms. Pena mentioned showing to motivate the children. How do you do that?
Oh my God, that is the ongoing topic. Yes, motivating, how do we motivate our kids? We do a peer-to-peer mentorship program because we found like me talking to the student was like mommy talking to him. They're not listening, they're not really, but if another peer, like a big brother, is talking to them, that's helped motivate them. There's times that the student just wants to talk and vent and just needs somebody to listen to them. And that just gets them like, oh, and sometimes they ask, what's your story? And they hear some of the stories of some of their fellow peers, and they get inspired and say, oh man, I wanna do that. And it's kind of like exposing them to another, like opening their mind and just saying, okay, it's not always about me, it's something more to it. So having them in that environment helps us motivate them to think another way and get them like, oh, thinking. And I just wanna instill that seed, that little bit of motivation, because a lot of times I have a 17-year-old son who'll say, I don't wanna do anything. I'm just not in the mood. I just wanna sleep all day right now. And so how do I, as a mother, forget about all the other work I do, as a mother, talk to my son about, man, how do I motivate him to do something, to step up and do these college applications that need to be done because there's a deadline, or I'm overwhelmed.
Okay,
High school,
Okay, you
exams.
say you want to motivate them, but what about helping them find a purpose?
About what?
Helping them find a purpose. Motivation can come from anything. We can give them money and they will do it. You know, we can give them food, this and you do this, you're gonna get that. But what about
So the
helping them find their
motivation, great
purpose?
point, because the motivation that we're trying to give them in our groups is to find their purpose. We can't tell you, you know, hey, but based on the conversation, that will develop. It happens organically, a lot of times within the circle of the conversation.
And if I could add, working with college age students, what I find motivates my students the most is when they feel valued. They feel like they have something to contribute, to give back. And when you feel like, wait a minute, I have something to give, or I have something that can make a difference, or, I just said something smart, you know, or you wanna hear my opinion, right? That makes them motivated, because it feels like, okay, it gives them a purpose, and you know, listen, college kids change majors like
That's right.
5 times
Yeah, I'm
before they
aware.
find. And, you know, oftentimes you go out to the work and you realize, this is not my purpose either. And so you've got to find that as you mature in age, and I think it evolves over time. Certainly I, you know, have those questions for myself, and I'm 44 years old, right? But I think that for me, the key connection with working with the students that are struggling the most is really showing that I value their being there, that I appreciate their effort, that I appreciate they haven't given up, because it's a lot easier to give up than it is to show up every day. And I have students that, you know, have to literally step over a sibling or a parent that is, you know, dealing with a drug addiction to get out the door that morning to come to class. And I can't imagine what it's like to be able to focus in a physics class when you're thinking about what you left back at home. So having them come to school and know that they can walk into my office and that I'll know who they are, and that I'm interested in knowing about their life and how they're feeling that day, makes a world of a difference.
Okay.
And can I just add to before we get to the next part? My organization is not specifically on dealing with youth, but we deal with a lot of youth, and I deal with a lot of youth. And what I try to impart on them is to value the journey, right? Because, you know, if you're just trying to help a kid focus on what do you want to be when you grow up, right? And they're like, I don't know, right? And so you're thinking, well, if they would decide when they're 9 that they want to be a doctor, then they're going to be, or a lawyer or a judge, that they're going to just work hard towards that goal. Yeah, there are some people who do that, right? They kind of have a straight line, right? But a lot of people are confused, and that confusion leads to kind of like not knowing, like, am I even doing the right thing? And so we try to say is, you know, value the journey, right? All the things that you do are going to help you have choices when you're older, right? And so get the education, go to college. You don't have to know what you're going to major in, because those of us who knew what we were going to major in when we started college are not doing, most of us are not doing the thing that we set out to do from the beginning, right? And so I definitely am not. And so I try to give my example of my story and say, you can do the same thing, right? And, you know, value the journey, enjoy the journey, work hard, right? And then you're going to have options later. And hopefully they'll value the idea of having those options.
Is that what you tell your children?
That's what I tell my children.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah.
I mean, that's super. I'm sure that's what you do. Hopefully you get out of bed.
Hopefully.
You know, I'm going to work.
It's a child, no, but, you know, so they go through their.
Not a small consideration, but they spend probably more hours with people unlike you with that discipline, that don't have that kind of discipline. And it's, like you said, it's easier to quit. I mean, we're creatures of leisure. Really, we are. Bending your back is painful. Thinking causes pain. So we need to get them to do these things. And it's great to have a parent like that, like you, a mother. And you gotta make sure that you're the one who steals that time from them, as opposed to always phone distracting. Hey, this is great if you tell them. You might even shame them into, listen, look at what we're doing here. How can you not want what we want? You know how many times I wanted to quit high school? Many times. I can't understand it. I always sit there, people are talking to me in foreign language. Who wants this? I want to get out of here. Okay? And she says, no, you can't quit. You can't quit. She wouldn't let me quit. You will do a little better than we are if you don't do this, only because you master the language, but not much more than that. And this is great. I mean, this is, listen, you
Well, we can continue this conversation for much longer than we're allotted time here.
Last
I'd like
question.
to turn the floor over to questions from the audience, and Edens, I'll take another question from you after I take someone from somewhere else, because I think some other hands have shown up, and I just want to give people opportunity. So yes, sir.
Oh, what's that? It was on TV this morning about the youth in the areas in New York. And one thing is the organizations and nationalities got to get together. African American, Haitian, Spanish. As long as we stay separated, we're weaker. And we got to get together and get the kids in school. See, I live by school too. You got all nationalities. That's when you need to lay the foundation. There's an organization in New York that was on TV this morning. They're trying to get every student an opportunity to go to a Broadway play. And their goal is that by 10th grade, they want every student to have an opportunity for education. And they said those that they were obsessed with already, they go to plays and see different people living. They come out, they do better in school, And the lady said that they had even approached them for college. We need something like that here in Jersey. We can sit here and talk all day long, but we don't get out and do something, your words are going to waste. And we got to get, the organizations have to get together. Here in Elizabeth, there's a distributors here in Elizabeth. We got every nationality in the world. It was our president, he may try to ship us all out of here. But you need an organization like that. Like she said, this kind of plays, Lion King and all, so the kids come out, they got a different mindset.
It's the exposure, absolutely. And there are a number of organizations that are doing that, but I agree with you that I think we operate in silos sometimes where, you know, each organization is targeting certain things and not coming together. And there are organizations like the Voice Leaders that offer youth conferences that encourage all types of students to come through, that it's just looking at students from a specific age range, and I'm sure that, you know, those students will be welcome. So it's potentially creating maybe a calendar that's shared with school districts, that here are activities that students can get involved in, give students opportunities. There are some districts putting pressure on our school district to take students, to use resources, to align themselves with organizations that are doing important work to provide that exposure. I mean, as a kid in Jersey City, I was taken to conferences. I had no idea what I was doing. Oftentimes it was my brother saying, you gotta come to this, right? But I was taken to those things, and it did open my eyes to what the world could potentially offer me that I didn't see from my seat in Jersey City. So I agree with you, and I think that's some of the work that we need to do as a community is how do we connect with those organizations? If every parent found one organization and said, hey, let's come together and let's either, you know, do some activities together, or let's just share our calendars, we would be doing a lot more effective work.
But just like this meeting here today, you need other districts to be in a meeting like this to express what's going on with you. I'm 80 years old, so I've seen all kinds of segregation here in Elizabeth alone. And I spent 9 years in the military, and I see the improvement. So there is the young, well, your age group, trying to get the education, and just don't go home and get your education and get a job. Get out in the neighborhood,
Yes,
talk to these single parents, talk to them, have meetings. Like I said, a meeting like this here should have more people here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
How do you propose we advocate for something like this?
Well, you got to have certain leaders to go out. It's like me now, in my organization, I go out to meetings like I'm here now today. But you have to start at the top to work your way down to the 10th, 9th, and 10th graders. But you got to get the parents into it. Call for meetings, send out flyers. You'd be surprised how people want to.
And let's qualify that leaders does not mean us old folk.
We all
No.
leaders.
All of you young folks, you know, you're on social media, you're getting exposed to things. Take a friend. I can't tell you the number of times that I organize events for our students, and I say, just bring a friend. Don't ask them, don't tell them where they're going, just bring them. Because oftentimes we'll make up excuses of why we do. So the leadership is not just in the hands of us older folks. The leadership comes up with you. So once you have information that you think could be useful for other people, share that information. Rally your friends around to say, just like you say, let's go hang out at, I don't know, my son loves Chipotle, for example. Oh, I'm gonna hang out at Chipotle. I'm like, yes, he loves Chipotle. Don't talk about it, because I don't like to deal with the after effects. But, you know, you can rally yourselves around organizations like Boys to Leaders, Aspida. There's tons of organizations. College outreach, you know, going to Union County College and say, hey, you know, what do you offer students? King University, Union County College offer programs for youth. And you knocking on doors. And I can tell you from my own experience, when I was in college, my friends were being indoctrinated into this honor society. And my first year of college, I partied like there was no other. I left my Dominican mother controlling father away, and I went to Rutgers and I had myself a ball. Well, I paid the price for it. So when here comes my friends going into these honor societies, and I'm like, well, I'm being left out, right? I could have easily said, oh, I'm just gonna, I messed up. No, I actually went into that office and I advocated for myself, and I said, I have that or more than some of the peers that you're allowing into the society. And I ask you to give my application consideration despite the fact that I don't make that GPA cutoff, because I have the drive and the commitment to do this. And they let me into the program, right? That wouldn't have happened unless I advocated for myself. So if you feel like your school isn't doing what they need to do, or that you see a void, go speak up for your student body. Go make yourself known, because that is critical to making change in society.
This is what I talked about, self-reliance.
Yes?
How are you supposed to make the students take that opportunity when there are, when they look up to the celebrities over there who are basically doing all sorts of things, and we want to be someone like them, we want to fit in with everybody else, but we also want to be somebody great. How are we supposed to choose between your opportunities to be who we are or fit with the society?
Yes.
I'll say this. The fact that you're asking that question is the answer, right? Because you have a big role to play in that, right? As Sarah said about the peers, right? Peers have a lot of influence on each other. And I'll give you an example. When we were at Rutgers, right, I remember I was a sophomore, and the seniors used to have these discussions about student apathy. Right, remember those? They said it's like every week there was another forum to talk about apathy. How come people don't participate? How come people don't care? And it was like, really? That's what we're talking about? Right? Like, if you want people to participate, you go out and organize, and you get them to, you talk to them, and you bring them here, right? And you do things that are interesting that will get them there. You don't sit around crying, right, to your point, about, oh, you know, why doesn't somebody else make them come, right? So for example, if you see the value in caring about important issues, right, you can do a lot to influence your peers, right? And say, yeah, we can all have fun, we can all talk about what's happening with the celebrities, we can like the music, right? But we can also organize some things around some issues that impact us, whether at the high school level, at the college level, right, or in the community. And so it's that kind of peer, you know, talking to each other. So we don't have to wait for the leaders, right? The older people, the leaders, to do something, right? When we were in college, we became the leaders. When we didn't like what the leaders were doing, we became the leaders, right? When I came out of college and I didn't like what the leaders were doing, I worked towards becoming the leader, right? And now, you know, I'm 44 and I have the gray hairs, and I'm old now, I realize. I woke up yesterday and I was old, right? And you guys are you're not the future, you're the present, right? And so what we try to do is create venues. We do our conference, Latino Action Network, we do our conference every year, the first Saturday in February. We're happy to have that young people do come to it. They go to all of our issue, workshops, where we talk about housing, we talk about education, we talk about criminal justice reform. You know, we actually not just have young kids, but we have ex-offenders, right? People who have been in prison. They come and they don't just participate in the criminal justice reform, they participate in all of them, right? Because these are people who are trying to get their lives back and be productive members of society, right? So we have, and I'm glad that we have African Americans come to our conference. It's a Latino conference, we have African Americans. We have a group of Iranian Americans who come from the Bronx. It's a great thing to see people wanting to share. So think about, I would say, I'll push it back on you and say, think about your network and what you can do to talk to your friends and your peers about, like, what are we spending our time on, right? It doesn't mean that we have to become 100% of our time activists, right? But wouldn't it be great if we spent 20% of our time or 10% of our time talking and doing stuff about real issues that impact us?
And I think challenging, obviously we all gravitate to celebrities and, the wealth and all of the lives that they live. The reality though is that you gotta go beyond what you're seeing. And what are they doing for their community? And do you align yourself with people that, do they share the same values you do? Look at Kanye West, for example. A lot of people like his music. Would you align yourself? Would you sit around a table and have dinner with him or invite him to your house? You've got to question that because just because they're in the forefront of social media and they're in the forefront of what media wants to present as the important stuff, they don't necessarily reflect you. And I think that introspection is very, very important. So,
Well, here,
I have another question here and then here in the front.
How will you be able to motivate teens to not be able to like wind up in the streets and help them find the path that is right for them?
So engagement, I truly believe in civic engagement, getting students involved. I know you guys are here today volunteering. This is how you help your peers by role modeling that behavior of you getting up on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning to come, work for the Historical Society of Elizabeth for free, maybe a meal at the end of the day. That is how you get kids off the street. You've got to engage them. I got off the street by working, whatever way, and I had great employers that were really motivating me to stay in school and do what I need to do. You have to surround yourself with those types of environments. So, if you have the time, rather than being on your phone or on your computer or sleeping in like some of you enjoy, find yourself someplace to give back your time. Whether that's in your, a community center, an organization, maybe volunteer in your own school, and that will connect you, with other places where you can give your time. Hospitals are always looking for places, food pantries. Get yourself involved. It gives you an opportunity to see what the reality is for people in your community that you may be blinded to, and that be your source of motivation to continue the plight in the journey.
But to get with the organizations, we need to get more organizations and more people to speak up. Because I'm here in Elizabeth, I see what's going on right here now. We got all kinds of nationalities, but we're separated. We need to get together.
Yep.
This last election, our mayor, he had opponents. He thought he was going to have a hard time. He carried all 7 districts because we don't vote. That's one of the basic things. We talk about the youth. We need the older people too to get involved.
Earlier in the session. Yep, absolutely.
My question was, like, you guys were talking about being your own leader and everything. How are we supposed to be our own leader, like in high school or whatever, when we get shut down so quick? Like, I've seen people go to the guidance counselor and ask to get changed into like an honors class, or get asked to change into Avid or something like that. And then the teacher automatically says no because he messed up in freshman year, she messed up in sophomore year. So now as a junior or senior, they can't do certain things. And like with uniforms, it's small stuff that I've seen a lot of people try to talk about with the principal and the guidance counselor, and they just get shut down. So I was wondering,
It's a challenge, especially at high school, right? And the power dynamic is just overwhelming, and I know, I remember it, right? I remember when I was in high school, but it can be done. It requires, we have a job to do, right? As the grown-ups, right? To try to engage with as many young people as possible to help you have the tools for organizing for your empowerment, right? Because empowerment is not something you send away for when it comes to you. You fight for it, right? Your power, there's a finite amount of power in the situation between the students and the administration. The administration has all the power, you have none. If you want more, you have to fight for it, right? So I would say, you come together with other students, find out, what other students are having similar issues to you, right? And instead of going in there by yourself and saying, just like this is my individual issue, start figuring out what the patterns are and saying, hey, students, why don't we all go in there together and say, there seems to be a pattern that's keeping us all out, and you're treating us all a certain way that we find discriminatory, right? You guys, you adults are supposed to be here to help us, right? And instead you're putting up barriers. So by coming together, and this is what I do for a living. I'm the vice president of a union, right? And I tell my members all the time, they pay union dues, right? And when I show up at their work site, they go, oh, the union's here. I go, the union's not here now because I'm here. It was already here. You're the union, right? The people who come together, they are the power, right? And so I'm always trying to teach them to come together to speak up for themselves, right? And I'm their employee. I'm there to help them and give them some of the resources and even training. But the same thing holds true for you as students, right? You don't need somebody to come in and necessarily, be your superhero. You need to come. You may need some training and some help from us. But at the end of the day, it's going to be when you all come together and you push back, right? And their parents need help, right? Your parents need help. They don't know what is okay to ask for or demand, right? So we need to do a better job of helping parents understand, like, what are the things that are available to my children, and if they're not getting it, how do we fight for it collective? right? So I think that it's not to throw it all on you, it's to throw it on us too, right? Again, I'll say that, we have one of our workshops at our conference every year is youth empowerment, right? And we're always happy because we have a big group of young people there, and we don't talk about issues per se in terms of, social issues. We talk about about how young people and their families can fight for the power that you need in order to get what you want. So, and not that we're not the only place. You have, different organizations that do it. I would say seek those things out, learn as much as you can, and then go back and use that information to fight for yourself.
And I would just add to that, find allies. There are teachers that are seeing this happen and, feel that it's a disservice, or perhaps can advocate for you and say, no, Gianna absolutely deserves this opportunity. Maybe it's a secretary in the school, maybe it's a cafeteria worker. Align yourself with those people, make them your allies, have conversations about how you're feeling. Oftentimes, they understand the inner workings of the school and the power dynamics better than you do, and are able to give you some sound advice on how to approach a situation. In higher education, my voice, I can talk till I'm blue in the face. Oftentimes, I'm not heard. But when a student writes a letter to the president, that gets circled around. It's like, whoop, wait a minute. So, and what I do is I tell my students, like, I hear you, I feel for you. But listen, I can't change it for you. Here's what I encourage you to do. I had a student just the other day who was a learning disability, came to me, she says, my teacher's not letting me use my notes to take my test. Can you talk to the teacher? And I said, absolutely not. It's not part of your accommodations. What you need to do is that you need to go to the vice president. You need to write a letter here are the points I think you need to make. Send me the letter, I'll edit it for you, and then you can send it to the vice president yourself. Those are the types, that's the way that I can help students make a difference for themselves, right? So align yourself. There are teachers that understand what you're saying. You find the ones that you feel comfortable with, the ones that'll listen to you, and oftentimes they're gonna guide you in the right direction. You don't have to do it alone.
You said about the teachers, right? But we talked to some teachers. The teachers agree with us, yeah, they do. But most of the times when they go up with their upper, they shut down the teachers and they tell them reasons why we can't do this, and they bring in, they're like, the law says this, the law says that. How will the teachers go up against that and we go up against that when they bring up points that we can't break?
I'm gonna give you my card, and we're gonna have a conversation. Okay, we're gonna talk about some of the issues that you're talking about, and we're gonna find ways that we can try to get them addressed. The answer may not be what you want, but at the end of the day, what you want is to be heard, and for them to be able to reflect as administrators that perhaps the system is broken. And you may not see it in your lifetime, but perhaps you have a sibling that's coming up that will have a different experience than you. So I'll give you my card, let's continue the conversation. And I would encourage you to do the same.
That's right. And take it all to the top if you have to. I served on one term on my school board in Plainfield, and I gotta tell you that when students would come before the mic and speak to us, man, we had to listen, right? And
You get nervous.
the board got nervous, because it was like, if the students were up here talking about an issue like that, and all the eyes were on it, if we ignored the students, it was at our own peril. And so, you might not think that, you have a voice. I think that when you try through the channels, you try to work it up, if you're not getting it, take it to the school board, right? But come as a group and come, show that there's critical mass behind you, that this is an issue that is impacting too many people and this has to change. And tell them, we might not know the answer how it changes, but you all are the leaders, you have to figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, you're not doing your jobs.
Well, we are well beyond our time. I thank you for being here today. Thank you all for joining us in this important conversation. I look forward to being able to continue this conversation. And feel free to reach out, either through the Historical Society or individually to either of us, to see if there's any way that we can support and we can transcend this conversation beyond the walls of this room. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There are refreshments in the back, green room.
There's a person in the back.